Hey guys, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse podcast, and I am on site today with Zebra Technologies here in San Jose, California at their Robotics Demo Center. And I'm going to be joined by Achal Arvind and Cody Upp here as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about Zebra Robotics, Zebra Technologies, and this new solution that they're bringing to the market and just recently launched last week, actually. So we're going to dive into it and learn all about it. But I guess why don't we kick this off? Cody, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role here and what you do?
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you guys being here. And my name's Cody Upp. I lead the commercial organization, so I have the privilege of leading kind of the marketing, sales, solution design element of the business.
All right. And how about you, John?
I'm the director of Robotic Solutions here, and what we do is our web app, so the Symmetry solution, our mobile app, and all of the components that include multi-robot orchestration and a few other pieces.
Great. So I think we got the right guys here with us to tell us all about this Zebra solution and what they're bringing to market here. So why don't we kick this off and talk a little bit about Zebra Technologies? Because obviously Zebra Technologies is ubiquitous within the supply chain space, whether it's, from warehouse perspective, retail perspective, you guys are all over, right? So now you're bringing this robotics into the fold, right? And been working on this for a little while. And so tell us a little bit about kind of the evolution of the Zebra Robotics side and how that's now leading up to this launch.
Yeah, so, I think Zebra Robotics has kind of been through an evolution. It started with the acquisition of Fetch Robotics a handful of years ago. And I think one of the things that we're really capitalizing on with respect to Fetch was just this incredible ecosystem of hardware solutions. Fetch had a go-to-market strategy of becoming a platform company. And in doing so, it was really a hardware-first methodology. And I think that laid a really solid foundation for us to be able to build upon. As the years kind of have progressed and as I've come into the business, we've totally retooled and reskilled the team to get very, very isolated in our focus. So going from a platform company that focuses on the development of leading edge hardware to getting really, really narrow into the persons to goods fulfillment space. And again, I think Achal probably has some data points on just the tailwinds we have as a business with that origin story. But fundamentally, it's shrinking our focus and getting really, really narrow and really, really deep into this persons to goods category.
Oh, interesting. And you want to add, Nathan?
Yeah, so exactly like Cody was saying, it's like all of our systems, all of our architecture was designed as a platform, was designed for flexibility. It was designed to allow us to get into a lot of different customers and markets. So we took a lot of the learnings from being in a lot of different environments and applied that to build a system that's focused purely on fulfillment, that's solutions driven, that solves a core customer need. And our entire system, our team, everything is now focused on the fulfillment space.
Achal's team has really taken that hardware platform and built up best of breed, some of the best talent in the industry to build out that warehouse execution software and build out the fleet management software. That's like a fundamental requirement for being, really competitive in this landscape.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I mean, bringing that talent in definitely, I think, is super important to be able to drive that. And I noticed there, Achal, you mentioned that you're focused specifically on the fulfillment space itself, right? So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about that decision to focus specifically on fulfillment versus, distribution as a whole or warehousing as a whole?
Yeah, so I think, it's a product of a few things, but I think largely it's the business pains that our customers are seeing. Like when we think about the percentage of direct labor inside of these facilities, there's a tremendous disproportional amount of labor continuously being spent on what we kind of categorize as the each picking function. And there's quite a bit of low-hanging fruit for us to be able to grab, whether it's long walk elimination, whether it's in-aisle travel reduction through really intelligent allocation, whether it's speeding up the task or picking the items. So things like how fast can we find the bin, search for the item, grab it, confirm it, put it. Just kind of the industrial engineering around that process flow lends itself really well to these applications. I think, in large part, some of these other workflows within distribution centers and retail replenishment environments, they're harder to optimize. They're harder to optimize for a lot of reasons. And so there's still a lot of froth, if you will, in the market for us to be able to go and scrape off and really drive incremental value to the businesses that have this kind of burden of being able to attract, retain labor, and then, have this other North Star of reducing variable cost per unit. So it made a lot of sense. And given the specialty that the leadership team has, this was an obvious decision.
Yeah, I think that's great. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's like all of the stuff Cody said, and also it's like what we found through the deployments that we had was that we could bring value to the segment. And we've also built ourselves in a way where we can start here and then expand to other parts of the warehouse over time.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But I think one of the luxuries that we have had, Kevin, is like we've been able to sit back over the last really 12 years of this market evolving, and we got to observe. I think to a degree, Fetch Robotics, the company that we had acquired, was kind of half in and half out of this industry, but to the extent to which we were able to really gain a deep understanding of the methodologies, the strengths and the weaknesses of the solutions that came before us, and we had the luxury of being able to design a system that really extracted those really great elements of those solutions, but harness and kind of exploit, if you will, the weaknesses of them and be able to come to the market with a solution that isn't just differentiated at a marginal level across the board, but has fundamental displacement value, something that really gives clients an unfair advantage that moves this technology from kind of version 1 into the next generation of technology.
Yeah, and I think that's great to be able to, like you said, kind of observe and take this, not necessarily a step back, but like this bigger vision and a view of it, and be able to see, how do we really attack this problem, and how do we, come up with a solution that's really great. And I think, it's interesting too, because obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning here, Zebra Technologies has so many other things going on in the space as well, in the supply chain as a whole. So I guess talk to us a little bit about how does the robotic side of the business kind of fold into and, even maybe leverage some of the other side of the business in Zebra Technologies as a whole, and kind of fit into that ecosphere that is Zebra.
Yeah, it's a great question. First thing to recognize is that to build a solution of this magnitude requires a tremendous amount of capital. So there's very few organizations that can get into this category. Just the barriers to entry from a hardware, software, and analytics standpoint, it's really, really difficult. You see a long tail of hardware providers, specifically coming out of the Asia Pacific region, but to have a full stack solution requires a tremendous amount of capital to get off the ground. This is something that we, as a Zebra Technologies business, we have that luxury afforded to us. But I think more importantly, what it does is it provides our clients with a level of security that we've had at a liquidity event. We were sold to Zebra. We're a part of a very, very profitable business that has a very long future ahead of it. And because of that, we operate on a longer time horizon. Like we get to look at this on multiple horizons rather than just living and dying by, a traditional startup runway. And because of that, we get to do things with Zebra's portfolio of solutions that give us a really incredible advantage. I think we started with obviously leveraging the hardware from the Fetch Robotics acquisition. In this latest iteration that you'll be seeing here in this video, I'm sure you'll see the use of our mobility devices, right? We're starting with a WT series wearable, but the portfolio of wearable solutions that we have to connect agents, to connect workers into the system is really, really broad. And then there's the expansion businesses within Zebra as well, whether it's RFID solutions, whether it's machine vision solutions, whether it's fixed image scanning. Like these are things that are kind of at the, the core of the supply chain. And for us to be able to string these solutions through into a broader, into a more impactful, into more holistic solution design for customers is something that, gives us an incredible leg up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having kind of those tools at your disposal, in a sense, right? I mean, allows for a lot more development, a lot more evolution, which I think it kind of ties back to what you're saying, being able to take time to really, come up with this solution and perfect it and make sure that evolution and the problem you're solving is really being addressed the way it needs to be. Right?
Yeah, certainly. And, just to be clear here, right? Like I think we've taken a period of time to observe, orient ourselves, make decisions and start acting. And now it's all acceleration. So we are moving at light speed, just given all the tailwinds that we have, given the engineering capacity that we have with Big Zebra, we are moving at a pace that, I've been a part of startup for the whole life. It's dissimilar to anything I've been a part of.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you just said Big Zebra, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Zebra as a whole.
Yeah.
And Achal, I mean, from your perspective on, the robotic development side and everything, I mean, what is that like to have that kind of existing toolbox almost, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. So part of this is that we get to leverage Zebra's learning in the warehouse space. So it's like Zebra's been doing this for a really, really long time. So there's a lot of people we can talk to from a UX perspective, from a design perspective, all the experience we have with our scanners, with our wearables, with a few other devices. And we get to use all of that in our solution development. In addition to that, like Cody was saying, we're using Zebra's wearable computers as well as ring scanners. And that's the first set of Zebra devices that we've integrated into our system. But there's a wide array of Zebra devices and technologies that we can start to leverage from as we go and expand the scope of our solution, as we start to expand our system. And there's a lot of learning and a lot of other stuff we can then leverage that's internal over time.
Yeah, and one of the things that we should mention here just on this topic is, designing and productizing a solution is one thing. Being able to deliver with the standards of quality, reliability that Zebra maintains as a business is something that's it's a prerequisite to being successful in scaling up these businesses. And then you couple that with just the support, the round the sun support that Zebra provides, through its partner channels, through its direct channels. These are things that are really instrumental to delivering on the value and then sustaining that value and iterating on that value that you deliver to end users. It's, again, right, it's almost like a perfect storm or a huge amount of tailwind for us to be able to come into the market with this type of solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of power there in the big Zebra, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
To be able to leverage that and bring that now into a new solution to bring to market, right? And, obviously a lot of great solutions and tools like you talked about that not only can you leverage now, but then well into the future as you continue to scale and evolve the solutions themselves, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the market right now, right? Because there's certainly, you mentioned, there's a lot of players out there and, a lot of different AMRs too, specifically as well. So tell us a little bit about from your perspectives, what did you see in the market that said that, we need another AMR, or, AMRs that are out there are not necessarily working the way that they should fully and getting that optimization.
Yeah, I don't even think that's our premise. I think the solutions that are out there are really great solutions. I think many of our team members have been a part of these organizations that have come before us. I think with every technology provider, there's evolutions. And the reality is that we've been in this category for 12 years, and the solutions that we're referring to really haven't fundamentally changed in those 12 years. There's been depth built, there's been more capabilities brought. But I think when we looked at this problem, really from a first principle standpoint, it was like, how do we flip the unit economics? Really, how do we have a North Star that's focused on delivering as much cash flow to that end user as we possibly can? And when we looked at this, it became pretty obvious, right? There's a few things that you can do to reduce variable cost per order, reduce variable cost per unit in end user environments. The top of that is cost. Right? We're not willing to sacrifice on quality and reliability, but the manufacturing scale that we have as a business allows us to be really competitive. The second is performance. When you think about the levels of automation that are available to fulfillment operators, there's categories, right? We operate in the persons to goods category. There are speed limits, physical speed limits that these solutions present, but there's a ton of advantages too, right? It's this constant balance of flexibility and productivity, but the incremental gains that you can get in coming out with a new solution from a performance standpoint, it's not going to be 100% greater than that of what the current providers have. And so we were left with the third variable as this kind of overwhelming opportunity, which is really just utilization. So it's utilization of both the human asset and the AMR asset. And again, the solution that we'll be playing here, what it represents is a decrease in the number of units, the number of robots required for a design by 30%. And that it's a fundamental shift in how we think about the economics of these investments. And we can talk more about kind of what are the derivatives of that 30% reduction. I hope we do. But that's just it. It was that third category of utilization, like not having robots sit idle, maximizing the form factor of the AMR to be able to maximize the qubit capacity, decoupling the AMR, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about. These are things that are a kind of an entry point for us to come in and, again, not just have a degree of differentiation here or a degree of differentiation there, but to come out of the gate and to be able to deliver a solution with a 30% reduction in autonomous mobile robots fundamentally impacts our clients' bottom line. It is a direct pass-through. That is a 30% margin increase that our clients get to achieve with their goals of being variable cost per unit, right? Like our goal here is to reduce variable cost per order and per unit without sacrificing quality, reliability, and service levels. And this is exactly what we were able to dial into.
Yeah, and I think that's a great approach too, because talking about the utilization, right? And you mentioned something there that stands out a little bit is not having these robots sit idle in a sense, right? And that makes a huge difference. And I think it's great that you're taking that approach, and you're recognizing too that there's some great providers out there already, but
Absolutely.
we're gonna adjust this dial a little bit and make it a little different in that sense to be able to really impact that bottom line, right? Aside from just gaining the efficiencies and making the worker well-being, have less travel, so it's a little less stressful of a day. and all those things. But, addressing that and attacking that bottom line, I think through the utilization is really a smart way to.
Yeah, and it's not just on the AMR side. Like I think
Yeah.
Achal will touch on, how the wearables and connecting that user as an agent is what we refer to it as an agent in the system drives a completely directed workflow from start of shift to end of shift of that operator. So in and of itself, right, we're optimizing the utilization of that associate, not necessarily playing hide and seek between these AMRs, but having a fully directed, task-oriented workflow that keeps operators on task for the entirety of their shift. And so again, that is fundamentally different than what's out there today.
Yeah, absolutely. Achal, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's like what Cody was saying. If you look at this from first principles and you look at all of the solutions that have been built, there are areas where you don't necessarily get the most out of your AMRs. And also as operator in the system, it's like you have to search for the AMR, so you don't always have the information that you need at your fingertips, like all of the contextual information. And as a manager of the facility, it's like you don't have all of the insights that you need at any point in time. So those were all the areas that we focused on. So one was, how can we improve a person's productivity? How can we get the most out of your workforce? And by having the wearable on an operator and them having all of the contextual information, and our system optimizing for the operators, the robots, all of the other elements of the system, we get as much as we can out of the workforce. On the other side, it's like, it was, how can we reduce any wasted time on the AMRs? So where do AMRs stay idle and what can we do about it? And I'm sure we'll talk more about decoupling, but it's like that was part of how do we reduce wasted AMR time and reduce costs? And in addition to that, it was what kind of insights can we provide a facility manager and have a single pane of glass so they have a good sense of exactly what's happening at their warehouse in real time. And those are kind of the facets of the system that we have.
Yeah, so Kevin, just rationalize that for a second. There isn't a solution out there that is a competitive solution today that is equipping operators with a digital agent, with a wearable, without any technology. These are unknown agents in the system unless that associate is in that moment on task with that AMR. So the amount of time that's spent off task is directly correlated to the amount of time that they're not directly in front of an AMR. And this is completely contradictory to what we believe as supply chain practitioners. At Zebra, they've been developing mobility devices for maybe 50 years now. And the idea that we aren't directing a workflow at all times through a building is almost nonsensical. And so we got away from this in the early, as an industry, we got away from this kind of the early days of this category where we went into a zone pick model. There are providers that went into a zone pick model where that operator was really left up to them to be able to prioritize work, find the best path to be able to get to that work, find the work itself and prioritize the execution of that work. That was all self-determined, right? And it left open so much underutilization of that associate that it's just logical. It will be the path forward. We'll lead the charge, but I assure you every other provider will follow behind us in digitizing the human. It's the sensible path forward in terms of the evolution of this technology.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because it is, kind of you're waiting for the work to come to you almost in a sense,
Absolutely,
right? Where
right.
you don't have any directive on your person, and what would be the wearable, right, is attached to the AMR in a lot of cases and just goes away when the AMR goes away.
Think about it this way. There's never an AMR that isn't assigned to an operator, and there's never an operator that isn't assigned to an AMR. That is a unique statement that Zebra Robotics and Zebra Robotics can claim. So I think that summarizes it well. And again, we're the first ones to kind of lead the charge here. And this is one of many things that we are making the evolution of this technology on. It will very, very quickly be followed by everyone else.
Yeah, interesting. And that's a great prediction there. We'll see
we'll
what
be
happens
back
there.
on that
Definitely.
one.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting. And I love it, Child, too, that you mentioned that, you took a look to see what those leaders in the fulfillment center are looking for too, right? How do they understand? How do they get visibility into what's happening? I mean, we see some of these fulfillment centers. I mean, they're massive, right? And, you're a warehouse manager and you're managing, 100, 200 people. Like, how do you even know what's going on all the time? So I love that you took that approach too, to focus on that as well. So I think that's really, really nice to hear that for those warehouse leaders out there as well as fulfillment leaders to be able to do that. But now, I don't know if you guys can tell, but these guys are like very excited to talk about decoupling. They mentioned a couple times already. Yeah. So, one of the big things that you mentioned, Cody, is that the ability to increase the utilization of the robot, which is directly impacting the bottom line, right? And I think one of the big things of doing that is this idea of decoupling the robot from the cart, right? So I guess tell us a little bit about what does that mean essentially, and then how did that idea maybe come about, and how does that work to increase that utilization?
Yeah, great question. So I think there'll be a statement I'll make, which is fewer robots, greater profits. And so if we can hit design levels, if we can hit performance rates and operate that at 30% fewer robots while maintaining a competitive cost structure on these solutions, that is the recipe for greater cash flow on these investments.
Mm.
And again, there's this massive shift that occurred in kind of the era of COVID, where it was okay to trade OpEx for OpEx. And what I mean by that is it was okay to just pay for robotics as a service operating expenditure so long as you reduced your reliance on direct labor. But there wasn't this kind of prerogative or this requirement that you kick off massive amounts of free cash flow. Fast forward to 2025, that is not the case anymore. CFOs are looking for meaningful financial investments that are going to impact bottom line. That's at the heart of our premise.
Mm.
Now, the idea of detaching the robot really came from a lot of the origins of Fetch Robotics. So what you're seeing in this video and behind us is a Connect system. It's something we've deployed at well over 100 sites now in a material movement setting. So think about line side delivery. Think about moving things from point A to point B to point C on kind of a traditional fleet management software application. So we're taking 5-6 years of experience on that product and bringing it into the world of fulfillment. But why does it matter? Why does detaching the cart matter in the context of our workflow and our process?
Yeah.
I would encourage you to think back to the times that you've been at other sites with AMRs. The amount of robots that dwell at an induct location waiting for work, the amount of robots that sit idle, waiting for work to be taken off. That is the biggest waste of AMR time in the entire system. And so for us, the first kind of big pass that we're taking at increasing utilization is making sure that the entire induction process, the entire pack out process is done without a robot present. And so being able to do these processes concurrently, being able to induct work onto carts, to build carts, stage those carts, and then only when that robot becomes available and there's new picks necessary to create a tour, does the robot come over and pick up that cart. And so decoupling these processes in and of itself reduces the number of AMRs, depending upon the facility and the design, by about 15 to 20% right out of the gate. So that was a big hit that we were able to make. The problem proliferates, right? So, there's this in every supply chain, in every process, there's bottlenecks. And so when you think about this, it's a balance of utilization, or rather a utilization imbalance that can occur. So what you'll see in any process is that there's feasting and starvation. So there'll be moments during an operation where you're going to have an incredible number of robots sitting idle at induct. And then you'll work through that, and then you're going to be starving. The induction area will be starving for work. And then there are going to be moments where robots are plentiful in the active pick area. And then there's going to be moments where that active pick area is looking for more work. And then there's going to be moments at pack out where it's completely empty. And then there's going to be moments where they are flooded with AMRs. The reason that this is important is because the cycle time associated with a pick tour creates this utilization imbalance, creates this feasting and starvation at the various workflow points throughout a process. And by decoupling the cart, by creating a third agent in the system, so the AMR, the human, digitizing the human, and the cart, we get to decouple these processes entirely and smooth out that utilization imbalance so we don't have this feasting and famine that occurs throughout these processes. So we're smoothing out the bottlenecks, and that has a huge, huge impact to throughput above and beyond just the utilization improvement.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, I can see how that definitely is then reducing the number of robots you actually need on site, right? Because you're decoupling that cart, right? And that cart is the thing that's going to end up sitting idle or waiting for some action to take, but then the robot is moving on its way, right? To be able to do something else, right? And continue to work instead of just sitting.
Yeah, tremendous number of downstream effects. And I think this is our launch. This is what we're coming out with. But what you found is kind of a lack of adoption of different workflows with other AMR providers. What I mean by that is like rolling out put away, rolling out replan, rolling out returns, rolling out bulk movements, rolling out case picking. Like these have been really, really difficult things for existing AMR providers to do, largely because it requires a different form factor. Like the form factor that you're picking with isn't the same form factor that is best for your put away transactions.
Right.
It's not the same form factor that you want for your returns processing. And for us, like creating a roadmap that has tremendous amounts of extensibility, meaning we can move on this path that we are on for many, many years to come starts at detaching the AMR from the form factor. And so instead of having to develop and sell a brand new AMR every time we want to get into a new workflow, we modify a cart. It's a fabrication exercise at that point. And what you're seeing behind us is very intentional. So you're seeing a cart that is in every one of the warehouses that your clients are in. The reason that that's important is we need to be scrappy, but we need to be thoughtful. And that scrappy yet thoughtful approach allows us to maintain the cost structure of these solutions. So again, modifying the cart to widen the dimensions, lengthen the dimensions, get more payload on the solution. These are all things that become fabrication exercises rather than overhauls on a hardware that has a pretty long evolution on the development cycle of it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that makes so much sense to do that, and as you said, to reduce that idle time and kind of that dwell time, just waiting for something to be done, right? And allowing it to go out. And I love too that it is just this cart that you would see in any warehouse pretty much out there, and easy to kind of bring those in, and I'm sure scale those up or scale them down however you need to. So Achal, what are your thoughts on kind of the utilization there, and talk us through maybe some of the development of how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you see how the system works, you'll see that the induction worker as well as the pack-out worker, they're instrumented as well. So we're not only directing our pickers, we're directing the workers at induction and pack-out. So we have complete control over the entire operation. And exactly like Cody was saying, it's like the process, the way it works, on the mobile app, on the wearable, you will see instructions for get a cart, scan the cart, scan a shelf, start placing your totes on that shelf. And as you start placing those totes on the shelf, we're tracking all of that in our system. And it's like once the cart is built, then we associate that cart with a position on the map. And that's what tells our system that cart is ready. Containers are loaded on the cart. Those orders are associated to those containers. We know what paths the pickers have to pick to that cart, and then the system knows exactly what to do downstream. Same thing happens at packout. Once the cart is dropped off at packout, the robot can leave the cart and move on to its next task. You don't have to be there all the time. Like when a packout worker becomes available, they log into their device and they get instructions on pick this cart and disassociate the cart from the pose, and they can take that cart out, allowing for better utilization of that space as well. And then they can pack out that cart with whatever downstream process they have at the warehouse.
Yeah, and at the heart of what Achal is saying is this idea of accumulation. And what you have to ask yourself, what is the cost of accumulation? And then how do I leverage this idea of accumulation buffers in my workflows? And so, I think this is especially relevant at Packout, being able to avoid double handling of taking work off of carts, putting it onto a staging location just to have to bring it over to a pack table, or maybe inserting a humanoid to be able to do that takeoff process because we know it's inefficient. Why don't we just drop off the accumulation element and move that accumulation element over to the processing area? And so it's a very sensible approach and a very cost-effective approach at not only increasing the utilization, but maximizing kind of the cost of accumulation within the broader system. But, Achal, you were starting to talk about team intelligence. I'd be remiss. Maybe we can get to that later.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. But I want to touch on something that Achal said there, where he said, at Packout, it's when someone is available, they can come and take the cart and address the work, right? Where I think, if we look at what we've been discussing here with, some of the other solutions that are in the market, right? In some cases, we talk about the feast or starvation there, right? In some cases, you're going to have somebody just, as you mentioned, or maybe a humanoid, right? Just, come, hurry up, let's empty this robot so the robot can go out and, feed the pickers, right? Whereas if you're dropping these carts off, then, like you said, when someone's available, they can get to the cart, right? It's not like the cart needs to be tackled right now and doesn't need to be addressed in the moment to be able to make sure someone else in the workflow can do what they need to do, right? Which I think is really important to point out. And I think it's very smart to address that and do that. So, I mean, I'm curious, and I know it's early deployment and, just launching this, but I mean, do you have an idea where, what is the kind of cart to robot ratio that someone can expect?
Ebb and flow based upon the workflow requirements. So Team Intelligence's approach, where we pair multiple robots, multiple AMRs onto a tour with an operator. The number of robots that we have on that tour is a variable that we control. It's a variable that we configure based upon the processing requirements of that particular operation. Things like order profiles and distance between pick locations implicate this size of floors implicate this, but it's really important that we can actually dial up and dial down the number of robots that we're going to associate onto a tour and then pair with an operator. And the reason for that is the whole goal is to be able to free the operator to move at the fastest pace that they can, knowing that there's always another robot positioned in front of a pick location for when, as soon as they execute that pick that they're currently on, that they can move and be directed using the wearable to that next pick location at their own will, and always have an AMR available for them ready to execute that next pick. So, it'll fluctuate in, really kind of a ratio between 1 and 3 right now. There are some use cases where we have like fast lanes where you have really, really, really high moving aisles where you just have a train of AMRs coming down. And so that kind of blows up that ratio, but it's an incredibly high performance pick. So yeah, it's something that we're really proud of, is that there's a configuration that we can make to adjust the robot to picker ratio in the aisle. But one of the things that's interesting, when you ask that question, it should be asked in the form of what is the system's robot to picker ratio required versus the in aisle requirement, right? So how many robots are required for robots to be productive and humans to be productive in the aisle? And then how many robots, what is the robot to picker ratio at a solution level, including induct, takeoff, and charging? And this hits at the heart of what we're doing, right? When you look at robot to picker ratios, largely they're communicated in the form of the number of robots that you need for the aisle. What's not taken into account is all that dead time, all that dwell time that's outside of the active pick area. And that's the hidden cost of these systems that we are eliminating, right? That's the 30% reduction that we're targeting, is this out of aisle time that these robots are sitting idle. There should be 2 calculations. Any buyer of automation should be looking at 2 calculations. It's the robot to picker ratio at a solution level from induct to takeoff, and then what is the number of robots that are necessary for operators to stay productive in the aisle.
Gotcha. Interesting there. And Achal, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think we started this by talking about like decoupling the worker at Packard. So something I want to add there is it's not just Packard, we also do that at induction. So both induction and Packard, the workers are decoupled. And in addition to that, we were talking about the ratio of carts to pickers. It's really like Cody was saying, it's a combination of a lot of elements that inform what size of cart we want to use, how many carts we want to a picker. And I think the really important thing there is the solution has the flexibility to get a customer the maximum value for what they're using. So it's like, imagine a customer has a lot of single line, single unit orders. You might want a different configuration there than a customer that has a mix of single line, single unit and multi-line, multi-unit. So we have the flexibility to configure our system to make it work really well for that customer.
Yeah, and I think that's great to be able to have that flexibility, and that decoupling, as we talked about, is such a smart move to be able to allow that utilization to increase and have less robots but more productivity, and be able to constantly have work flowing throughout when the work is needed, right? Instead of hurry up and wait, or wait and then try to hurry up and figure that out, right? And I think for the worker too, I mean, that becomes a challenge, right? It becomes frustrating in some sense, right? It's like, well, no work is coming to me, so I'm idle, and now all of a sudden it's hurry up and get all this work done, right?
So yeah, I mean, it's worthy of expanding on. So when you think about like a traditional zone pick method, and there are many scenarios where we are going to deploy zone picking methodologies, where zone picking methodologies make sense. But if you were to take a geographical zone pick and pass approach, where effectively I'll take aisles 1 through 10, you take aisles 11 through 20, and you take aisles 21 through 30, and you're responsible for manning that zone. And as work comes into your zone, it's your prerogative to go and find that work and execute that work. Well, at the heart of this, right, if you were to strike a utilization balance across all 4 of those zones, there's a prerequisite here. And the prerequisite is that every hour of every day, of every shift, you have equal amounts of volume coming into each one of your zones, or else someone's going to be waiting for work. Either a robot's going to be waiting for a picker, or a picker's going to be waiting for a robot. And this is like, really, team intelligence solves this by tasking individuals through a series of steps. Now, there's always scenarios where the distance between pick locations in a pick sequence should exceed a certain value, and you should pass the robot to another operator. Our perspective is just don't aimlessly pass that. Put it into a sequence, assign that task to an operator, and put it into the sequence of another operator. So, I think it's an interesting topic, but it all boils down to utilization. Like this is when we examine this problem, there's just utilization inefficiencies everywhere. The performance will continue to get better and better and better, but the room for improvement on performance doesn't fundamentally shift the unit economics of these investments the way that utilization does.
Very interesting there, and an interesting perspective on that too as well. And all right, so we mentioned the team intelligence here a couple times, so and kind of a little bit about what that does, but I guess dive into that for the viewer listener here on what exactly that is.
So if there's a couple different methodologies today, there's a swarm methodology, there's a follow me methodology, and then there's a team intelligence methodology. What team intelligence first and foremost does is it incorporates the operator when making allocation decisions. So because we have proximal understanding of where operators are on the floor, we're taking in the amount of operators that are on the floor, we're taking that into context when we're making allocation decisions. So it starts with digitizing the operator. Team intelligence kind of elaborates in a 3-step allocation process. So the first allocation process in team intelligence is we want to maximize a grouping of orders to minimize the distance between picks at a cart level. So we're cubing out that cart, grouping the best orders that we can on that cart such that we minimize the distance between pick locations. This is basic order affinity warehouse execution software capabilities. The next step, which is unique to us, is then we are taking this virtual allocation of carts that we've done and we're creating tours. So we're taking more than one cart, oftentimes 3 carts, and pairing them together into a tour. So an operator will be assigned a tour, and that's the third step. The third step is after we allocate the work to the cart, after we allocate carts to a tour, then we allocate that tour to a operator. Now, what's really, really interesting is that we get to use proximal location. So because I'm tasking you as an operator through every one of your steps, and I've assigned you a tour of work, you're responsible for a subset of work, I know where you are, and more importantly, I know where you're going to be. So take an example of you going back into zone 2 and you're operating in aisle 12 and you have a tour that you're currently operating on that ends at the end of aisle 12. We know that. We know that when we're making allocation decisions. So we're grouping carts together, we're creating a tour and placing those robots in aisle 13 so that as soon as you're done executing your pick at the end of aisle 12 on your current tour, there's immediately a tour already positioned in aisle 13 that you are directed to go and execute those picks. So there's a proximal allocation based upon your current location that is really, really important. And again, you can't do that until you digitize the agent. So team intelligence kind of net here is this idea that we are pairing multiple robots to a tour, allocating a tour to an operator, placing these robots in front of pick locations, and then having responsibility of those pick tasks be assigned back to the operator, and then creating this continuous loop, this kind of perpetual picking motion, if you will. As soon as you're done with one tour, there's another tour that's been allocated close to your proximal location so that you have this continuous loop of work that you're working through. Maybe Achal can add some color in terms of how we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like the crux of what we were trying to do with team intelligence is as a picker, you always know what you're doing next, and what you're doing next is as close to you as possible, given the orders that we have in the system. From a user experience perspective, it looks really simple. It's magical, right? It's like all you're seeing on your variable is go to the next location, and once you're at that location, it tells you exactly what to pick, where to place it, and once you're done with that, it tells you go to the next location. So it's seamless, it's easy. But in the background, there's a lot going on. So once we get all of the orders in the system, exactly like Cody was saying, we look at all of the orders that we have and we're creating these tours. And the tours, like Cody was saying, they're spread out between operators. So each picker, their work is spread out. You're not getting congestion. But for each picker, we're making sure that your work, your next pick is as close as possible. So your experience is you're not walking a lot when you get to your next pick. So once we come up with these tours, we go to the next layer in the system, and that layer, it's taking into account like time, space, and charge. So it's looking at where are our agents, like where are our robots, how much charge do they have, where are our pickers, where they're going to be at some point in time. So we're looking at all of these different elements, and then we're allocating the work that we've come up with. And we're allocating not just to robots, we're allocating the work to robots and pickers, as well as to induction and packard. So it's like really all of the instrumented workers and robots are all getting allocated work. And then when they're allocated work, it goes to the last layer in our system, and that's the execution layer. So at any point, we have full insight into exactly what each agent is doing, what assets are being tracked, like what orders are picked, what exceptions we have. And then all of that can get accounted for, reported, and we're constantly replanning. So as new orders come in, as the environment changes, our system's smartly adapting. But all of the complexity goes away. And as a picker, your experience is really magical. Like you just get told, go to this location, and pick at that location and then just work seamlessly.
Interesting. And for any pickers that are watching, if you've ever had a magical picking experience, they're delivering on that here. I like that you said that, definitely. And I think that, that's such a great thing. And I think you guys talked a lot about the utilization here, and it's, not only looking at the robot utilization overall, but I think with this team intelligence, it sounds like you're looking at, robot utilization, cart utilization, person utilization, approximation of location on that person, right? And really looking at the overall overarching utilization of all those different agents, as you guys have called them, and assets within the facility, and how do you bring those all together to make sure that you're executing at the highest optimized level as possible, which I think is great. And I can certainly see how that utilization overall is going to tie directly into and impact that bottom line of the fulfillment center, and be able to help reduce those costs, and be able to push that efficiency through. So now if we look at the solution itself, and I think utilization and that idea of cost to certainly, that's been one barrier of entry, we could say, for a lot of people, right, into the robotics and automation side of things. So tell us a little bit about the solution, and who is this addressing in the market? You mentioned fulfillment centers, but at what size is this? Enterprise only? Can we see some small business action here? I mean, who are you really targeting, and who can, I guess, utilize the solution to be able to get better utilization?
Yeah, no, great question. I'll take a step back and just kind of double down on something that Achal mentioned. So in terms of the performance of the allocation, we were talking about how we minimize the distance between pick locations. There's a thought exercise that I like to kind of take people through, which is, take a scenario where you had a cart that had the cubic capacity to fit only one order.
Okay.
How much order affinity, how much batching could you do to find commonality across orders? And the answer is, of course, there isn't any. You only can fit one order on this cart. Now you take that to the extreme, and you start to get into scenarios where you get really, really intelligent order allocation batching. And you do this through not only increasing the capacity of the cart, which we've done here, increasing the number of orders that we can fit on a cart to find order affinity, to find SKU affinity, to find multiple picks from the same orders. But we've compounded that through this idea of a tour, through this idea of pairing multiple AMRs to an operator. So when you think about the capacity of our solution, you're not thinking about it in terms of the capacity of a cart. You're thinking about it in terms of the capacity of the tour that we're assigning to the operator. And so take the example where you have 3 AMRs paired to a tour. Your cubic capacity is the total available capacity of all 3 of those carts, because they've been assigned in sequence into a tour for that operator, and they're making a single pass through that aisle with all 3 of those AMRs. So it's a really important point in terms of just the performance of the system. Okay. Now, as it relates to kind of who we're addressing, what I will say is, when you decrease the robot requirement to the magnitude that we have, you get to tap areas that have been untapped previously. When you change the unit economics of these investments in such a way where you need 30% fewer robots without adjusting cost structures, you get to go down a level. You get to go up a level in areas where the investment, the automation costs were too high. I think to give kind of directional guidance, these investments really start to make sense when you're north of 8 pickers. When you're north of 8 pickers, there's math to be penciled out. I think that's something we're going to continuously work on. Like, it's really important that we make automation and the investments of those automation make sense for operations of all size. We're not going to be perfect for everybody. We don't want to be. That's not our intention. But to be able to have a solution that is democratized in the sense that we can deliver these really simply with high degrees of efficacy to small and large organizations is certainly a part of our mission.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing, because there is such, I think, a bit of a gap there a little bit in automation. It's kind of addressing that and being able to come and, kind of fit the all-encompassing market in a sense. And
we got to move from novelty to utility. Like, warehouses are cost centers. They are a cost center at their core.
Yeah.
And the goal should be increasing throughput at the highest quality that you can, at the lowest possible cost structure. And again, you can't do that by just, focusing on costing out on the AMR, but there are areas of the operation, areas of the solution that adding additional costs. Every aspect of the solution, every caster, every shelf, every bin needs to cost justify in and of itself for it to fit into our solution.
Yeah, if I may add to that, it's like, we're very intentionally, like, across the system, trying to make sure the barrier to getting this to customers is as low as possible. So some examples of this, it's like, we're really network resilient, so we can just work with, like, customer networks. Our SLAM and localization solution, like, requires no modification to the environment. It's like, our WMS API is designed in such a way that it makes integration with the WMS, like, really seamless and really easy. So across the board, we're doing things to make it such that we can reuse as much of our customer infrastructure as possible and deploy as easily as possible. That allows us to get to like more customers.
A large reason that these solutions haven't really been able to go down market is as much the cost structure and utilization of the AMR as it is the one-time costs, right? So at Achal's point, like the cost of integration, the cost of networking, the cost of fixed infrastructure, whether that's, bollards or guardrails, these things add up. When you sum them together, there's this hurdle. It's an investment hurdle that you have to overcome. And in order for you to overcome that investment hurdle, you need a certain amount of labor in your building to justify that. And that's really the barrier to entry, is the one-time cost structures that have prevented organizations from being able to see good positive economics on these investments, and has prevented them from going into the down market.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to hear, and I love that you guys have thought about that, and this overarching goal of better utilization, but then I think that also leads into better accessibility, right? To be able to bring robotics and automation into a facility and an operation there. So really great to be here on site with you guys and learn about this and kind of dive into all the different aspects and the thinking and the evolution behind the solution, and now coming to the market and launching this as well. I know you just launched, right? But what does the kind of future of this robotic solution and Zebra's robotic arm look like, and what's the roadmap like?
Yeah. So again, it really starts with kind of the design principles that we've done with Connect, right? There's just such a huge roadmap that we can go forward with. I think from my standpoint, we want to be really conservative with our growth. Like, we want to make sure that we don't bite off more than we can chew. And so we're really select in the number of projects that we're doing this year, making sure that we deliver on value that's promised, committing to that value in every sense of the word, and then delivering on it and then compounding on it. And so I've had the privilege of being a part of organizations like this in the past. And the most important thing is to get a initial subset of customers that are just absolutely obsessed with your product. And that requires a level of bear hug. We know that requires a level of bear hug on the onset. And so there's short-term vision, there's long-term vision. Right now, we're so focused on kind of tactical execution and making sure that the clients that have trusted us with doing these projects get every penny that we promised them. From there, I think there's obvious ones, right? So we talked about kind of the cart being enabled for different workflows. The most promising aspect of that is that we don't need additional AMRs, right? So being able to sweat the asset, being able to drive greater utilization of the asset through additional workflows is something that is really, really obvious, I think, for Achal and I. Additionally, we see a ton of value in different methodologies. So when you get down to very narrow aisle, it doesn't make sense to have a large robot to picker ratio. There's probably a scenario where we want to go into a follow me mode down a small aisle. There's absolutely scenarios that we're doing now that make sense for more advanced zoning strategies. So picking methodologies, allocation strategies, additional workflows, and gaining a ton of depth on the product above and beyond delivering on that initial promise of the cash flow that we're stating in these early engagements. It's really low-hanging fruit for us to go and grab.
Yeah. In addition to that, I'd say the other part of this, just given we have instrumented workers, we have robots traced throughout the whole system, we have like rich data collection. And because of that rich data collection, we can provide a lot of insights to our customers. So right now we have a single pane of glass, and as part of our roadmap, we're going to be working to glean more and more insights and provide like real-time information, like to facility managers, to like stakeholders, so they can better optimize and manage their warehouse.
Yeah, just to highlight that, I think there are definitely areas of analytics that you can track with the current solutions that are out there, but they are a fraction of what is available when you equip and digitize that agent. That's why I have such conviction. I'm like, that's the path forward in task assignment and making sure that you have digital traces of human activity. You're so limited in the data set that is available to you. Like, you're getting a sliver of their overall productive time in that building because you're only getting the time that they're on task with that AMR. You're not understanding the full picture. You're not understanding the full shift of activities. And like, for you to provide any direction requires for you to at least account for the total amount of time in the facility. And I think that's exactly the thread that Achal's pulling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great thing. And I think the decoupling of the card too, as you're mentioning that, Cody, allows for so much evolution too of what can you put on top of that robot and do in the future. I know like my wheels are turning a little bit there too as well. It's great to see how you guys have approached this and how you're coming to market and what you're trying to address within fulfillment centers. I think very, very smart. way to approach it. And that decoupling makes so much sense to be able to increase that utilization. You want to add one thing?
Yeah, it's the way of the future. We'll either do it or somebody else will. I have absolute conviction we're going to be the ones to do it, but it makes too much sense for everyone else not to follow. Like it is such a step forward in the way that the modeling and the solution design of these AMRs are done. I don't see a world where the rest of the market doesn't evolve here. And the imperative and comment that I had made earlier in terms of moving at an incredibly accelerated pace. At Zebra, we know we've got a certain amount of time here where we have a unique, unfair advantage because of this solution design. But like resting on that is not part of the equation. Part of the equation is accelerating and going deeper and deeper and deeper into this design, knowing that just on paper, in reality, in the operations that we're deployed in now, we're seeing these results and it will catch wind and the rest will follow.
There we go. Wave of the future, Cody saying there. So would definitely look forward to seeing decoupled robots in a fulfillment center near you. Cody, I guess you want to close us out here. Tell us if people want to learn more about the Zebra Robotic Solution, how to get in touch. What's the best way to go about getting these in their fulfillment center?
Yeah, very thankful to the New Warehouse podcast and Kevin and the team for coming out here today. I'm sure you'll get additional behind the scenes looks at what we're doing and things we can talk about offline. You can reach the team at zebra.com/robotics. And of course, we'll be launching all over on LinkedIn and elsewhere for you to be able to find us. But we're really excited. I think our commitment to you is to seek to understand your operation before we seek to be understood about our solutions. So the goal for us is not to put AMRs in every operation. The goal and the aspiration that we have is to uncover value opportunities, design those value opportunities, commit to delivering on those value opportunities, and then live up to those promises. So really excited for the future.
All right, awesome. And thank you to Cody and Achal for joining me today. And thanks for Zebra for having me on site here as well to look at this brand new solution.